Ian Huntley's dead. And in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to explain in plain English what a death in custody actually is. What changes if someone dies inside a prison or later in hospital? What happens to the body? What coroner's court look like? And why this process can rip through a prison long after the prisoner is dead. Because the headlines is the easy part. The hard part is everything that comes after. You've got police, coroner, possible jury inquest, evidence locked down, staff decisions torn apart, questions about what the prison knew, questions about what was missed, questions about whether the state lost control before the prisoner lost his life. And that is exactly why I'm using Ian Huntley as a case study for this episode. Not to glorify him, not to defend him, God no. And definitely not to do the same lazy headline recap everyone else is doing. Because loads of people online will tell you that he died. Very few, if nobody else, will tell you what a death in custody actually triggers inside the system. And that is what I do here. I show you the prison system from the inside out. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand more about what happens after a prisoner's death than most people ever get from for mainstream coverage. So here's the confirmed outline. Ian Huntley was attacked in the workshop at HMP Franklin on 26th of February 2026. He was taken to hospital with serious injuries. And he died on the 7th of March 2026, and current reporting says that he was being treated at Newcastle Royal Victoria Infirmary. Another prisoner, Anthony Russell, has now been charged with his murder. But before you start glorifying him, just remember he's also a convicted sex offender and a rapist. Here's the first myth to kill straight away. People think, well, he died in a hospital, and think that somehow makes that less of a prison death. It doesn't. If someone is injured in prison, taken to hospital, and later dies from that incident, that can still fall within the death of custody framework. The final breath being taken in hospital does not automatically wipe away the state's responsibility for what happened before that. He was still cuffed with officers by his bedside. And that matters because the difference between somebody dying inside prison and somebody dying later in hospital, it's not the difference most people think. If someone dies inside a prison, in a cell, on a landing, in healthcare, in a workshop, anywhere on prison grounds, the body and the area around it immediately becomes an evidential process, basically a crime scene. That means the prison is suddenly dealing with a live scene. The location matters, the body matters, CCTV, radio traffic matters, observation book, paperwork matters, timings. Who entered the area? Who touched what mattered? Who saw what mattered? Once death is verified, the priority switches to preserving the scene, preserving the records, notifying the right people, and keeping hold of material for the investigation that follows. The actual HMPPS framework specifically points to retaining things like CCTV, body-worn video where relevant, incident logs, radio recordings, observation records, and restraint documents. If somebody later dies in hospital, the prison is not controlling the body scene in the same way, because obviously the death happens elsewhere. But that does not mean the prison gets to step back. It has to preserve the trail back to the original incident. So, what happened in the workshop? What happened in his cell earlier on? What was on CCTV? What was logged? Who responded? How fast did they respond? What was said on the radio? What was known before the assault? What was missed before the assault? Did we have any intel about it? What paperwork exists? What paperwork does not exist? So hospital does not mean the prison washes its hands of it. Now let's get into the bit that people always want to know, but almost nobody explains it properly. What actually happens to the body? Inside a prison, the body is not just removed and forgotten about. Once death is verified by a qualified person, the prison follows its own death in custody process and local contingency plans. Police requirements and scene preservation can become central straight away. The public framework does not give a simple blanket saying officers always leave the body at this exact point. or in hospital, cuffs always come off immediately at that exact point. So I'm not going to fake you certainty. In England and Wales, the coroner is who controls release of the body once it's no longer needed for the investigation. And the cell, in a shared cell especially, the framework is clear that care has to be taken when moving the cellmate because vital forensic evidence might need preserving. Police gets primacy over access to the cell, and the PPO might later want to review the cell or space, speak to witnesses, and gather evidence before property is even dealt with. So the cell clearance is not simple and it's not quick. Now, this is where it gets heavier because once somebody dies in custody, it also becomes a coroner's court issue. A coroner's court's job is to establish who died, how, when, and where they died. And whether coroner has a reason to suspect a violent or unnatural death in custody, the inquest is generally held with a jury. That means this can become a full public examination, not gossip, not prison rumor, an examination. And for staff, that can be grueling because whether the death was self inflicted or not, the people meaningfully involved can end up being questioned in painful detail. What did you know? When did you know it? What did you record? Why did you record it like that? Why didn't you record more? What time did you check? What time did you leave? Who did you tell? What did healthcare know? What did security know? Was that put over the radio? What was captured on CCTV? Why do these logs not match? What was the risk and why was it not escalated? Why was that warning not acted on? Why did it take you that long to respond? Now, does anything change because the prisoner is high profile? Legally, not in the core sense. There is no separate secret law for notorious prisoners. The same basic machinery still applies. Operationally, it's the pressure that changes. Because high profile deaths bring more media attention, more reputational risk for the senior staff, and the national framework specifically includes notifications to the press office and, where relevant, senior leaders, including the executive director of high security prisons. Now, let's deal with the bit that people are searching for online right now: Ian Huntley's mother. Family notifications, it's not supposed to be a rushed phone call. A cell clearance, it's not supposed to be a quick tidy up. The next of kin must be contacted properly, given an accurate account, told what happens next, and when possible, a trained family liaison officer should visit in person to break the news and support the family through what follows. And I'm going to be really respectful here. There is reporting that Ian Huntley's mother was at his hospital bedside before he died. Family contact does not automatically mean funeral responsibility is confirmed. Those are two different things that people are blurring them together. And that brings us to the funeral question. So, under HMPPS framework, prisons must offer a contribution for up to £3,000 towards reasonable funeral expenses, usually paid directly to the funeral director. No cash is exchanged between the prison and the family. It's not a blank check and not some luxury send off. Now, here's where it gets interesting because within the national framework and policy, prisoners' own money cannot be touched when it comes to paying for his funeral expenses. So, if Ian Huntley was working, which he obviously was, if he accumulated a little bit of money within the prison, that money is not to be touched. If there is no identifiable next of kin, or if the body in this case probably is disowned, the local authority has the legal duty to dispose of the body. When the prisoner died in hospital, the hospital might also be asked whether he wants to contribute to those costs. And it doesn't matter whether it's Ian Huntley or some unknown name. This same process would be followed for any other prisoner dying in custody. Because once the state locks somebody up, the state takes responsibility for lawful control, for proper investigation when things go wrong, and for answering properly when someone dies in custody. So when you see the headline, do not stop at the headline, because the headline is cheap. The machinery behind it is where the real story lives. You will get headlines everywhere else. You will get outrage everywhere. You will get myths everywhere. What you will not get everywhere is somebody showing you coldly and calmly what the prison system does from inside out.